Let's do it. Do it.
Do what?
You're dumb, dude. Let's do it.
Stew it? Do it? Is that what you said?
Let's stew it.
Oh.
Do it. Stew it.
Hey, we're recording.
Hey, one thing I noticed before we start, stew is half of stupid. Have I ever told you that before? Just a random thought of the day.
We're gonna cut that part out.
No, we're not.
Oh yeah, because I don't know how to.
Let's do this, man.
Dan, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, Stu, good to see you, and Dave, good to see you as well. It's been many years.
It's been like 18 years probably. That's about when we were got done at the Naval Academy. But
you're an English major, right?
Yes.
Yes, we were.
Yeah. Did you guys have classes together?
Yeah, man. I think we had to have at some point.
Such a small. There's not a lot of English majors at
no.
Academy, so.
Just at the academy they call them the elite. The elite are the English majors.
Yeah.
So few.
I don't know about that.
Stu has me proofread his emails, dude. The emails that we send to our investors, I have to proofread them for Stu. So just throwing that out there.
Hey, but I have to proofread all of his analyses on all of our rehabs and our contracts and looking at deals. So it's a win-win situation.
That's a lie because I don't even do them.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
This is about us.
Anyways, this is Filling the Storehouse podcast. I'm Stu. That's Dave. That's Dan. And we have an amazing show ahead. I'm pretty fired up about it. Dan, I'm not going to lie. I was doing fanboy, Googling, watching all of your videos, watching all of your speeches, just getting fired up. And Dave and I were talking earlier, we're pretty excited about having you on an interview and talking about your story and what you can bring to our audience. So over to you, man. If you could just kind of give a little background of who you are and who is Dan?
Well, thanks for having me, Stu and Dave. I'll give you a 2-minute intro, I guess, into who I am and how we connected. I grew up in Kansas on a 5th-generation family farm, and I knew in high school that I wanted to go to one of the service academies to combine college with military service, and I went to the Naval Academy. Fortunately, got into the best one, the Naval Academy. I applied to West Point as well. I wanted to be a Marine, but by the end of my first year, I had shifted over to hoping to be selected for the SEAL community after we graduated. We did graduate in 2002, and I was one of the members of the class chosen to go to BUDS. That's where I went. A month after graduating in June 2002, I reported out to Coronado, California, went through all of that training. We can probably talk about some of that later. It was grueling, but at the same time, I met some of my best friends and learned a lot about my own self. And some of the principles that I learned going through that training really come into play later in my story. So I started deploying in the SEAL teams, was having a little bit of career frustration. Although I loved being part of the community, I wasn't getting the deployments that I had hoped to be getting, given all that was going on in the post 9/11 world. And so seeing some of my friends and peers getting some of the deployments that were enviable, I was feeling a little frustrated. And then finally I get to be a platoon commander at a SEAL team based on the West Coast. And we got orders to really go on an amazing deployment that would be a true test of leadership, skill, and training. And that's where I got injured. I was on a nighttime assault operation, which we can talk about later if you want, but stepped on an IED, and that resulted in the amputation of both of my legs. I then, my whole life just veered off in a totally different direction. I'm no longer going to be an operational SEAL. I had many other goals in that community. It's not going to happen. I could stay in the Navy, I could stay as a SEAL, but I wouldn't be operational like I wanted to be. So really had to start thinking, what is the rest of my life going to look like? Immediately though, how am I going to get through these surgeries? How am I going to get through this mentally? How am I going to learn to walk? Where am I going to go next? And eventually figured it out with the Paralympic ski team for the US. And that has been what I'm still doing. It's been almost 10 years now. And that has taken me to living in Colorado, to now in New England. And that's pretty much where you find me right now. I'm near the end of my Paralympic career, but still very much loving it and training and doing some public speaking on the side. And I'm in a pretty good place right now.
Yeah, you know, there's I would encourage anybody to, as Stu alluded to earlier, we're both Googling you and just kind of fanboying and trying to just, you know, see what you've been up to. It's been a while, but I'll tell you what, you know, we kind of, you know, that's a very quick, we could probably spend 2 hours just talking about your backstory and an intro. But one of the things that we really want to focus on in this is, you know, go, if you don't mind, kind of highlighting some of the highs and the lows of the process that you just described, right? You became a SEAL, a huge high, I'm sure. And then obviously the injury and the subsequent surgeries and the identity struggles and all that kind of stuff. Like you went through a lot, man. If you don't mind just kind of touching, because a lot of our listeners are military members, and they can be going through, a lot of them are going through some dark stuff. A lot of them are going through, we have some clients that personally through Storehouse that have battled cancer and have fought through a number of different ailments and life-threatening things. And I think your message is a message of hope and a message of endurance and what the human spirit can do. And I think there's a lot in that. If you don't mind just touching on a couple of those items, that'd be, I think it'd be really appreciated.
Sure. I hope that I can leave some of the audience with principles that they can apply in their own life for situations that may push them to their limit or situations that they are not sure they can get through. I certainly felt like that. If you can go back in my own story to this injury, when I woke up from a 10-day coma, induced coma in a hospital room, I had no idea how I got there. Where am I? And my mom's face was about a foot away. The last memory I had was being dragged into a helicopter in the middle of the night in Afghanistan. And so now I just woke up and I'm in a hospital and my mom's face is right there. After initially commenting on her coffee breath that was hitting me, I was trying to figure out how did I get here? What happened? What day is it? I don't know. You know, I asked a person, a medical professional who was in the room at one point, whether my legs were gone, because I wasn't looking down that way and my mind was all clouded up with opiates and my body was covered in blankets. And they said, yes, gone. That's a really tough thing to hear. You go from being fairly invincible in the military, and certainly I knew people who had died, and you may be willing to accept that risk, but there's this middle ground area that you don't really contemplate often, which is having a catastrophic injury, but surviving it and then being maimed for the rest of life. And so I was willing to accept my own death, but I don't think in the years leading up to this, I had ever considered being severely injured. What would the rest of life look like? So I'm not really mentally equipped to deal with this. And it's just sprung on me. My whole life has gone a different direction. And I kind of would have ups and downs. There would be setbacks out of my control, but I was going through surgery 3 to 4 times a week, 7 to 10 hours of surgery, sometimes longer. It's a lot of time in the surgery. I wasn't sleeping well, wasn't able to eat or drink anything because I had an NG tube up my nose, down my throat, into my stomach. So no food, no water, fed by IV, hydrated by IV, nightmares, delirium because of the painkiller. It was really a low point for me. But how do you get out of that? Well, you focus on what you can do. And every day, just try to get through that day. There would be a lot of visitors, just going one visitor at a time. That was exhausting for many reasons, but it did keep the day going. I would look forward to surgery because that would at least be some unconsciousness for me when I wasn't sleeping. I strapped up some therapy bands onto my hospital bed so I could do some basic exercises to get my arms moving. That motion and mobility lifted my spirits. I had friends coming in, my family, people in some cases I hadn't seen in years, people from the academy or from the Navy or from the SEAL teams that I just hadn't seen in a long time, or people that I knew from different walks of my own life, meeting each other for the first time. That was neat for me to experience. But overall, I was really just trying to take one day at a time. And this goes into something that I learned in SEAL training. When things get really hard, you really have to just prioritize what is the most important thing. You can't process a bunch of different things at one time. I think a lot of times leaders get overwhelmed by either way too much going on, or in the other case, the other extreme is there's no one single course of action that seems to be the best or even possible. So on one extreme, way too much going on, the other extreme, not enough going on. And you have to just prioritize. And so for me in the beginning, like the most important thing was getting through the pain. And sometimes I would have to focus on just trying to get through the pain. And then it would be make it through today, and then get to tomorrow, and then focus on tomorrow. There's going to be a surgery. You'll be unconscious for a little bit. You'll wake up from that, make it through the rest of that day, get to tomorrow, just kind of that process. There would be setbacks and move forward with progress again, and then setbacks again. And sometimes I had emergency surgery that really set me back. And that was frustrating. I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't, but throughout it all, I had some internal sources of motivation. I had some external sources of motivation, my friends, my family, wanting to represent the community I came from honorably. So if my own internal motivation was lacking a little bit, that external motivation could pick me up. And but for the most part, I think having a positive mindset is really important. And there's always ways to focus on what you still have. And for me, I've got my arms, and there's this thing called the Paralympics, and that's really where I started to form some goals.
I think that's can be transcribed so easily and well to business, right? And this is a business podcast, but there's so much of business and entrepreneurship and just life in general that has to do with mindset. And just your story of just overcoming this incredible obstacle and focusing on the day-to-day items to get you through, and not belaboring, not worrying about the future, not knowing what's going to happen in the future, the unknown, and going through just a day-by-day thing, just focusing on what's next. And one of your stories that I listened to you talk about was the log story of going through Hell Week and Buds, and listening to that of like getting through moving this log on your log races, and just how heavy it was, and one step at a time, right? Like, I think that can so easily be transcribed to business. I mean, there's so many things that come up, the challenges, and then also you talk about having gratitude. And if you could just kind of talk through that a little bit, this life lesson of always being grateful for what you have, and how that has helped you through this, through this season.
Sure. I think the gratitude that I have came from an overwhelming sense of perspective that I eventually learned. When I initially woke up in the ICU room, you are in as much of a bubble as you can imagine in an ICU room. I couldn't leave. The only time I ever left that was getting wheeled over to surgeries, and only 2 visitors could come at most at a time in a sterile ICU kit, gown. And so I didn't see other injured veterans. But by the time I got over to Walter Reed Army Medical Center, I started at Bethesda Naval Hospital. At the time, they were 2 separate hospitals. They've now since merged, which makes sense. But at that time, started at Bethesda, being in the Navy, and then went over to Walter Reed when it came time to start doing serious physical therapy, to get fitted for prosthetics and learn how to walk on them. And that, for the first time, now I'm just all of a sudden surrounded by dozens and dozens of amputees from the wars from Iraq and Afghanistan, and being thrust into that environment really opened my eyes. I remember multiple quadruple amputees. I often think about them. I remember many triple amputees, and these individuals were working very hard every day doing physical therapy. And how could I mean, really feel sorry for myself. I also know guys who have died, and I know that there are many people that I don't know who have also died, and that their families would give anything for them to be, if they had to have been injured, to just be in this situation, just missing 2 legs. But to be alive. I mean, I know that. And so being in that environment really gave me a perspective that is not to say that I just felt better about my own situation because there's a bunch of people that have it worse that are around me. It's not that. It's to focus on reminding myself that this isn't that bad. It's not the end of the world. I have my brain. I can think. I have my arms. I have long enough limbs to be fitted for prosthetics, and prosthetics will eventually allow me to run even if I put in the work. So that perspective then led to just being grateful for what I still have. I can get caught up in this or that, and a lot of this comes down to blast physics and what it did and what it could have done or what it didn't quite do. But I'm left with what I have, and so why lament what I don't have? That's sort of my position. And when you were talking earlier about just doing what it takes to get through today, I don't want to leave the impression that I didn't have long-term goals, because I think if you focus so much on just getting through today, you're almost like a ship without a rudder. You're just kind of going over each swell, but you don't have an overall direction. And so long-term goals can be extremely powerful to get through any sort of a difficult situation. But if in the middle of that situation, if you think about how far away these goals are, it can be very discouraging. So having this ability to kind of navigate between the long-term goals that will really be a source of strength, but also down into the weeds of what you need to do right now to get through this moment. And that is really, I think, the overall lesson that I learned about the power of goals, but also the potential concern around this focus on goals.
Yeah, I love a ton of what you just said. I mean, we could literally talk for hours on that, but I think what really strikes me is that you're very intentional, right? There's this mindset, and a lot of people think mindset's like a thing, like, oh, my optimism is something that you're born with. You're a half full or half empty glass kind of guy. That's not true. Like, you spent time and effort to develop a mindset. You found the things, and like you said, it wasn't to say, well, they've got it worse. It was, you found the things in you to be grateful for. You focused on those things. You established the goals. And then I think one thing that Stu and I talk about a lot is you know, the mindset's a part of it, and it's very intentional, but then there's action steps and there's action items to get to those things. And I just think it's incredible. Everything you just highlighted is super motivating me, because it, you know, especially in like today's day and age, with you're inundated with social media and the news and all this negativity and the all the riots that are going on, and potentially whatever side you're on that, and the politics and the ugliness and COVID, and some people are just they're just not thriving in that environment, and then others are. And I think everybody's in the same environment, right? The external situation that we're in is the same, but people just choose to be different. And I love how you just highlighted that you chose to be different, and you set those goals differently, and then you took action steps to go after them. And I'm kind of curious, you know, one thing that that I was wondering, you know, it took you about 9 years, right, before you started talking about it. And I'm just curious, was that something intentional, or is that a realization on your part? Because, you know, knuckleheads like Stu and I listen to things that you say, and we're super motivated, right? And you motivate millions of people who watch your videos or listening to your talks. And I'm just kind of curious, you know, you have huge influence. And I'm just curious if that was something that you're coming to a realization, or it was too painful to talk about, or what kind of prompted that change?
That's a good question. I'll be perfectly candid. There were not really opportunities until I got a gold medal. And that is just how the how it works in the athletic world. When you get a gold medal, these doors start to open. And then I held a line before that I wanted to stay quiet and be a quiet professional, not wear my military service on my sleeve or try to profiteer from military service. That is what I stuck to. And then I got a gold medal at the 2018 Paralympic Winter Games in biathlon. And then there was more pressure and also, to be honest, financial incentives. And so then that runs right up against these other principles that I had. And I started thinking, well, this is an opportunity to make some money off of all the work I put into training and it doesn't need to be just about, or anything about the military or whatever. It's my message and I can control it. If I don't ever talk about some of the things I learned, I'm not going to help people. So there's this other side of it. And I thought, surely there's got to be a balance between not being just all out there, all over the place, talking about yourself, self-aggrandizement, versus just being a total clamshell and not talking about anything. And then when I die, whenever that is, my story goes with me. So there's got to be some kind of a balance. And I thought, if I start giving some talks and it just doesn't feel right, then I'll know, and I just won't do it anymore. But at least go forward with this. And so I spent about a year working with someone and developing the narrative and then committing, in my story and what I feel comfortable with. And so yeah, I'm not 100% comfortable just talking and being out there because I do think some people in the military have crossed that line, and I don't want to be one of those people. So I think if I ever have that weird feeling in my gut, then I'll probably stop doing it. But for now, I think there's always ways to improve upon my message and hopefully developing some new content too. So I'm not just talking about stuff that happened over a decade ago as well.
Yeah. And before Stu asks the question, I don't want to forget, I just want to encourage you that, dude, I'll tell you what, you have influence and people are listening and they gain hope and inspiration from that story. Right. So of course there's that balance. And I think there is that, you have to honor yourself, your principles and the things that you're comfortable with. But I also just want to encourage you in that you are making a difference, and you'll never know the people that you're impacting. Right? You'll never know, who listens to this show. We may never know. And they're like, man, Dan can do it. I can do it. And just to be an inspiration. So I just want to encourage you, very briefly in that you're crushing it, man. It's awesome. And I'm glad that you, obviously congratulations on the gold medal. That's huge, but I'm glad that you have intentionally taken that and have turned it into a story that I think has the potential to change tons of lives. So it's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a challenge, man. I mean, David and I still go through it. I mean, we're still both active duty Navy and in pretty, decent sized leadership roles. And we've had plenty of talks about, social media and this podcast and throwing yourself out there and, like talking about our real estate and, all the stuff we're doing that and trying to balance between like self-promotion versus, trying to just help people and being an influencer. And, for the longest time, like, dude, I didn't even have any social media channel whatsoever. Like, didn't have a Facebook page, didn't have a LinkedIn page, like none of that stuff, because I was kind of in the same boat. Like, yeah, I'm just going to be a quiet professional. I'm going to, be a fantastic naval officer and fly helicopters and airplanes and just get after it and be a leader. I think at some point, like, there is a message. We all have a message, and we can all influence people and be a mentor and a leader. And just like what David said, man, I think what you're doing is fantastic. And there's always going to be that balance, but I think social media and all that can be used for good if you have that intention behind it. So I want to talk about your transition to becoming part of the Olympic team and kind of that story of going from in the surgery room to now becoming a gold medalist in the Paralympic Games. I think that's pretty freaking amazing, man. So like, how did you get there? Like, kind of tell us kind of that shorter version of that story.
Sure. Thanks. The year is now 2011. It's almost 2 years after my injury, and I was kind of looking at what I was going to do next. I had been approached by one of the liaisons from U.S. Paralympics, which falls under the U.S. Olympic Committee, while at Walter Reed to come check out a sports camp. And at that sports camp, I got recruited by the cross country and biathlon coaches, and they invited me to a camp in Montana a few months later. It'd be a snow camp. So I showed up there and was completely underdressed and didn't know how to when you're missing legs, it's not like you can just buy pants that are form-fitted and keep your legs warm. So I didn't know how to keep my legs warm, and it was dumping snow, and I'm on this seat that's on skis, and it's incredibly hard to do it. And future teammates are just whizzing by me like so fast, and I'm thinking, wow, that's amazing. It's really nice though to be back in the woods again. And I love trail running, I love mountaineering, and when I got my legs amputated, it was really hard to get into the woods again. I was starting to run now, and running was great, but it's on roads, it's on a track. I was hand cycling.
You were doing marathons, right? Weren't you doing like triathlons?
On a hand cycle, which is running is incredibly hard. Hand cycling relatively is easy, but it's in DC and it's getting honked at by cars, and so I was really craving just being in the woods again. And cross country skiing was special because I was now in the woods and I just need to start training. And the Navy was very, very Naval Special Warfare community, very supportive. They said, we'll send you out to Colorado on 3-year orders. And
that's awesome.
I thought I could make the 2014 team. That would be a big goal for me. And so I moved out to Colorado, still on active duty, stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, and living up in Winter Park, training. I was living at high altitude and was I took a kind of a buds mentality into training for a high performance sport, which was that if you go to bed exhausted every day, and if you don't, then you didn't train hard enough. But that's not necessarily how you train to be able to peak your personal performance in the sport. Now, I had a lot of snow up in Colorado, and that was good as a newer athlete, but probably was doing a little bit too much work. I showed up at the 2014 Paralympic Winter Games, made the team, which was awesome, but I had a decent games performance. It wasn't my best. And then I came back, got out of the Navy, and then really started training in New England. Some things switched around in my life. I was going to graduate school using the GI Bill, which I highly recommend. And living at sea level, that was a different thing. I was now a New England skier. There's a ski track not too far from Boston where I would go during the weekdays, then on weekends trying to get up to Vermont, following the training plan, doing new equipment design, innovating from one year to the next, keeping what worked from the previous season, discarding what didn't work, coming up with new nutrition, strength and conditioning ways, equipment ways of trying to maximize performance. Then I showed up in 2018, really in Korea, ready to go mentally. I was in the best ski shape of my life. I had not much pressure on myself. I'd been in graduate school, didn't have a lot of international appearances. So I didn't have a lot of pressure. I wasn't one of these athletes that gets pre-picked. And so it was a good confluence of many things. But certainly for me, I want to say, this has never been about medals. It's easy to say that. But when I really, really look back on the experience, and I'm still accumulating experiences as a Paralympic athlete, but where I'm positioned right now as I look back, it was about being out in the woods and training and pushing myself and being part of a team environment, representing the U.S., seeing progress in my life. So important after being at that ground zero point.
Probably felt like being part of a SEAL team again.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's different,
Sure.
We're not putting our lives on the line or anything, but it has some similarities. For me, it was a fairly seamless transition. And so I truly love racing and pushing myself. And you really do. Fitness is one thing, and fitness is very important, certainly for anybody in the military, any tactical athlete, law enforcement, first responder. But what it also teaches you about these principles around resilience and mental toughness really can apply to other aspects of your life.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. And what are your goals now for, I mean, you're still training, are you looking at 2022? Like what are long-term goals?
Well, I think it's useful to separate performance outcome-based goals from process goals. And I really, after the 2014 games, I really reevaluated the way I set goals. We, after every season, for our athlete contract, have to come up with seasonal goals for the next season. It's based off the previous, but really looking at process goals, not outcome goals. So instead of saying, I want to be a gold medalist or I want to win, that to me, there's so many factors outside of your control because I have no control over the situation. There's a pandemic going on right now. I may not have a ski season this winter. I cannot in any way, shape, or form control what the Russian athletes are doing to train, or the Ukrainian athletes, or the Chinese athletes, or you name it. So I can only control what I can do to prepare. And so instead of saying I want to be the winner or I want to be third place or whatever, it's I want to perform to my maximum at this certain point in time. It's March 2022, let's call it, which happens to be around the time the Paralympic Winter Games are going to hopefully be happening in China. And so that involves a lot of back planning, seasonal, and then, you know, you're trying to peak, and if you miss it a little bit, you can be off. So it's just about to perform to the best of my ability, both mentally and physically. And that's my goal. And then from there, I'll come up with, you know, some of the midterm goals that are season to season. And that, you know, involves equipment, nutrition, sleep, strength and conditioning, technical skills, tactical skills. And then from there, you know, you're breaking it down into maybe the goal this month or the goal this week, more short-term in nature.
I'm assuming you're writing all this stuff down and setting it and tracking it and all that kind of stuff.
Well, you know, I think long-term goals, if you really hold them deeply, I think it's a little silly to write them down. I mean, I look at when I woke up and was in the hospital, I had 3 major goals. Getting out of the hospital. I didn't know when that was going to be. Walking and running. Yeah, walking and running. And so these are not, I mean, I didn't need, it would have been silly to write, I want to run. It's like, I'm thinking about this all the time. It's just, I don't know to write it down. Right. But I do think, you know, obviously for the contract purposes as a Olympic, Paralympic athlete, you have to formalize the goal setting. And I really do think that in the midterm and the short-term space, it does make sense to break down the components of your discipline, your craft, your job into those components and identifying strengths and weaknesses. And it's not like you just say, I want to be a better hockey player. You got to say, well, what are the aspects of being a good hockey player? There's on ice skills, there's stick handling, there's strength and conditioning, there's team skills, there's individual attitude, you know, all these things you can break it down into components. And I think the military would stand for this. Certainly there's a formal evaluation system, but what I have now seen in the athletic world with goal setting, I think could really help people in the corporate and military environments.
There's a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution that we read a little while ago, and it's really good about kind of what you're talking about setting the goals, but then he calls it lead measures. And so there's lag measures, and that's like, hey, I want to lose 10 pounds, right? But then there's the lead measures that are like, all right, what are my daily actions? What are my lead measures that I'm going to do on a daily basis to get me to losing those 10 pounds? And it sounds a lot like kind of what you're describing with, you know, setting, you know, the daily actionable steps to get to what your goal is for, you know, in your, you know, training and stuff like that. So it's a really good book if you haven't read it.
Thanks for the recommendation. I'll check it out.
Yeah. Dave, what you got, man? What you got?
You know, there's so much. I keep saying that, but you just keep blowing my mind down. I'm curious. What do you do? Like, what does a day for Dan look like? Like, what's your, you know, besides being a stud and And if you're looking for, I don't know if you're looking for best friends, Stu typically tries to jump in on that, but
Hey, man, I was going to ask him that next. Come on.
he doesn't want you. He doesn't want you. You're not his type. But I'm just kind of curious what a day looks like, because, just breaking down just the intentionality and the elements of what you do on a daily basis.
Well, I would say I would qualify that by saying, are we talking about pandemic times or normal times? And are we talking about winter? Because there's winter and then there's off season for me as a skier. If it's an average day in the winter, there's a decent chance I'm in Europe competing. I don't know if that's going to be happening this winter. An average day this winter, I will be on snow. Typically my training is I wake up and I train. Wake up, eat breakfast, train. And then right now, the second half of the day, I may have another workout, but I devote that to maybe if I have a virtual talk or something like such as what we're doing right now, I don't schedule any of that stuff before lunch, and it should be in the afternoon or the evening. And then, so train in the morning, recovery, doing either a second workout or maybe like stretching, mindfulness work in the afternoon, reading, and if working with my manager to develop content for future talks. Also, if I have anything going on with O2X or team meetings, check-ins with coaches, things like that. And then in the evening, hanging out with my girlfriend. So that's pretty much, in some ways, the life of an athlete can be very, very monotonous, and that is actually the point of training, is just isolate variables, focus, and just train and recover. And so don't do anything too strenuous when you're not training. But I certainly I try to read a lot. And when I was in graduate school, I had felt a pretty good mind-body balance, similar to, I think, how it was when we were midshipmen at the Naval Academy, where everyone's doing sports, everyone's taking classes, and you're in that environment where you're getting pushed by people. And so I was really, really enjoying that. And then now, since in the 2 years I've been out of graduate school, trying to kind of at least challenge my mind with reading. But I don't know how much longer I'm going to be a Paralympic athlete. I love racing to the point where it's worth it to do all of the hundreds of hours of training in the off-season months when races are months away still. But I just love it so much. Even now, though, I have to say, with the pandemic going on, I'm in a very fortunate position, because I'm under the Olympic Committee. I have my military pension, and I'm able to make sure that I can stay healthy. Not everyone's in that situation, but the reality is, I don't know if there's going to be races this winter. And so it's very difficult for me mentally to comprehend maybe not racing for 15 months from now. And all of that is probably 800 or 900 hours of training with no racing, which is it's almost, so for me, I'm thinking, okay, let's come up with some strategy, because this is a new externality that I have to, if I'm going to talk about mental toughness or whatever, I have to live it and work on it. And you don't just either have it or you don't have it. It is something you have to work on and work on and work on. And so keeping this motivation to do this through a winter where there may not be any races, hopefully there's something domestic going on. We'll see though, but I can't control it. I can only control my training and my preparation. So that's what I'm focused on.
Yeah, and I think there's so many parallels to what you said. The life of an athlete. I think there's a lot of parallels to the life of an entrepreneur, right? It's, I think a lot of people like to focus on the sexy part of sports, the gold medal, the championships, the stand, all that kind of stuff, the crowds. There's, as you said, 800 hours of training that goes into potentially, a couple of those events. And I think as an entrepreneur as well, just the monotony of paying the bills and keep grinding and find a house, buy a house, sell a house, and what people like to see is at the very end, a successful business, right? Like it was made overnight, and it's just not that way. And I think that, you really hit on the mental toughness that it takes, and the parallels obviously it's a completely different skill set. It's a different mindset. Your goals are different, but ultimately you want to win, and you want to race, you want to compete. And I think however you define winning is, as you alluded to earlier, it's not about the medals. It's about all those other factors that make you happy. I think that there's just so much in there, man. If you haven't started your book, put me in contact with your manager. And I'll talk to him about some future endeavors for you. But I just think that there's so many different parallels to life that you hit on, and the monotony of it. Ultimately, the glory that's defined by what you achieve in the end is worth all that hard work. So that's pretty awesome, man. I'll be praying that you can get to some races, and hopefully, I never thought of it from the context of how difficult it would be to push yourself that hard, and ultimately, there's not that payout at the end. So that's tough. So I'll be praying for that.
Well, thanks. I mean, and I do realize that in the grand scheme of things, whether I have a race season this winter or not is not that big of a deal. However, for me my own personal challenge is just to be able to hang on, stay motivated. And there's absolutely strategies. For me, I've recognized traveling around and being in new environments really rejuvenates the training. It can get a little stale sometimes training in the same areas, on the same trails in the winter. So maybe this winter I'll explore new places in northern Maine, near Canada. It's a vast area. There's got to be tons of places to ski up there, and just find some new hills and new trails, and maybe that'll reinvigorate my.
Man, Colorado already has snow on the ground this year.
Yep. Yeah. Stu went through that yesterday, right?
Yeah. Yep. Crazy, man. I think it's gonna be a long winter with lots of snow. So come out and hang out here.
Have to go. I don't know if you cross country ski. It's you have to go uphill in cross country skiing and downhill. It's not just take a chairlift.
Yeah, I snowboard go downhill only. So I'm out.
Yeah, when you unstrap to go uphill, it's not a good day. A lot of sweat, a lot of crying, especially if you're doing it with Stu. A lot of tears. The tears end up fogging up the goggles, and you got to help him chip. Dude, it's not even worth your time, man. I'm just telling you. Stu's a crier. I don't know if you remember that. Stu's a crier.
Hey, I'm just I'm an emotional guy.
Appreciate that.
Speaking of snowboard, I remember watching some videos on you surfing. And you supporting, getting involved with this nonprofit called One More Wave. Can you talk on that a little bit? I thought that was freaking awesome, man.
Yeah, One More Wave is great. It's been started, I don't know the exact year, but I want to say 4 or 5 years ago by a very well regarded, respected SEAL, and they're doing great stuff working with veterans who've been injured, getting them surfboards, and their niche is to build customized surfboards. A lot of organizations may take vets out to surf, but they're left at the end of that surf session without a surfboard, or a surfboard that's just off the shelf. But One More Wave has paired with custom shapers and very respected shapers out in San Diego area to make surfboards, and they've made a few surfboards for me. And I've had the privilege of going on a couple really awesome surf trips that has really boosted my learning curve out to Indonesia. I come back from one of those trips and my boards are all punctured up from reef.
Yeah.
So it's surfboards they take a beating.
Yeah.
And I'm just getting better at it. But right now, one of the ways I decompress after a pretty intense ski season is to go surfing. And I didn't really get that this year. I'm not complaining about it in the broader context, but I just love surfing because it's not competitive for me. I wouldn't want it to be competitive. Love being in the ocean. You just got to know your limits and keep it within safety.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I mean, I'm just incredibly amazed at the stuff that you are doing and have taught yourself to do. I mean, it's awesome, man. It's awesome. Talk about O2X. Talk about some of the other stuff that you're doing.
Yes. So one of the ways I've been able to find some purpose, because when I was out in Colorado training for the 2014 games, I was very much focused on that. So focused. I didn't have anything else going on in my life. Training was everything. And put a lot of pressure on myself. When your whole life is training and racing, you want to do well. And because you realize how much you've put into this. But now that when I started in school or now working with O2X, I'm just getting a lot more fulfillment from giving back some of my own lessons. With O2X, it's great because I've straddled the tactical world and have straddled the athletic world. And the premise at O2X is training tactical athletes, first responders primarily, to do their job, to be able to prevail in their career over a long career and not get injured halfway through and have to retire early, and to be able to make it to retirement. So that involves strength and conditioning. And within that alone, there's a lot to learn, and how to warm up properly, how to take care of your body after workouts, the kind of workouts that you need to be doing, maybe not just only cardio because you need to be able to haul equipment upstairs, but not just strength because you need to have endurance for long firefighting scenarios. You don't know what's going to happen. Worst case scenario is a 9/11 style scenario where you have no idea that today that this is going to happen, and yet it happens. You have to respond and you have to be ready, and you don't know when it's going to end. So that's a very ambiguous environment. So then that involves resilience and mindset. And I teach a class on goal setting. I tell my personal story, and then that leads into a 1-hour follow-on workshop on goal setting. But O2X has psychologists that are performance focused or psychologists that are trauma focused, strength and conditioning specialists, nutrition specialists, sleep specialists. Firefighters and first responders have really erratic sleep schedules. And so balancing that out, recognizing that sleep is very important, but you can't always get it when you need it. And so trying to work around the limits that they have. So O2X has assembled a really good product. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, a lot of the in-person workshops have closed over the last few months, but it's just now starting to get back going again. And I did one a few weeks ago in person with the Boston Fire Department. They're also getting some stuff going with federal agencies and National Guard units. So I think for me personally, it's just awesome to be able to talk about my passions, which training and human performance and persevering through difficult situations, and to hopefully help people, hopefully help them. And they are definitely serving the country and the public interest, and for me, hopefully to help them do their job better.
I can say with the utmost confidence that you are helping them quite well. I've never sat through your class, obviously, but I'm sure that, it sounds like an awesome organization. Sounds like well thought out, and the intentionality behind it sounds incredible. Is it something that, is it like a for-profit, or is it something that we could potentially support, or what's the I guess the money arm behind O2X?
It's a company. It is not a non-profit. It's a for-profit company, and just working with a lot of the public sector departments, local fire departments across the country, expanding out, doing a little bit of work with professional sports teams, the Chicago Blackhawks, and some other hockey teams, and again, maybe getting into the National Guard space as well. I really wish, as a new SEAL officer, not in BUDS, but right after BUDS, could have sat through the O2X workshop, the 4-day, 5-day workshop, because there's a lot of valuable information and stuff that I just didn't know. And in BUDS, there's a lot of physical training, but there's not a lot of discussion about why you're doing this or how to properly train after. And I really think in the last 18 years that I've been in BUDS, that it's changed a lot. But it used to just be beat downs, and that's not necessarily, when guys would get injured later. And so putting the O2X curriculum to work for military individuals would be really, really great. That's a whole nother discussion I'm not involved with, how to make that happen, but maybe that's the long-term direction for the company. They also have a wonderful product that would be useful for corporations. I just don't know how much corporations devote to employee mental and physical health in a tangible, viable product like this, but something I think they should be doing.
There's I think it's huge, man. I think we have most of our listeners, I would say, I would say for the most part, probably military and veteran, and hopefully, we could, kind of spread the word about that, and first responders, firefighters, if anyone is out there that could be interested in talking to Dan about that, I think it be incredibly beneficial for sure. You talk a lot about like mindfulness and nutrition. I remember hearing in one of your conversations. You know, I've recently started meditating myself, because I know it's just a success habit that a lot of incredibly successful people do. Have you found that helps quite a bit, and that is that talked about in O2X a lot?
O2X does have yoga, and they do yoga nidra, I think so it's a form of relaxation, I think. So I think it's useful to separate maybe a breath practice from meditation. I guess what I would do would be considered more of just a breath practice, and I started doing it admittedly for sport specific purposes. I think sometimes we often need some sort of intention to do something, but at its best, I think you're doing this just because you're doing it, not necessarily because if you come into it with, well, I want to do this because I want to be better at my sport, or I want to be a more successful person, you're putting pressure on yourself, and this stuff takes time and it takes patience, and just so I'll try to, for 5 to 10 minutes a day. Don't always have time, and sometimes I go in spurts, but just focusing on my breath, breathing. I initially, for maybe 20 to 30 seconds, I'm just taking deep breaths, holding it, deep exhale, deep inhale, hold it, deep exhale, and then just transition into normal breathing. And I just try to focus on my breath, follow it through my body and out of my body and into my body and down through my body and back out, and just following it. And my mind inevitably wanders, or it just falls asleep. But the moment I realized that I wandered, I just try to bring it back to my breath. And so I'm just trying to train my mind to be able to refocus on the task at hand, which is actually really important in my sport. In biathlon, you need to come into the range and shoot. You have a high heart rate. There's an announcer saying stuff. None of it do you really want to be thinking about. Other athletes are skiing around. There's stuff going on. There's pressure that you put on yourself. So the ability to refocus is really important. I think this is very useful in tactical situations, for special operations, for infantry, for pilots. Just before you key up the radio, being able to pause and take that breath and calm yourself. And so this is just what I'm training myself to try to be able to do.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. That's incredible. I think the mind over matter and everything that you've shown that you can do. And I don't want to focus on I think it's interesting. I was thinking earlier as you were talking, I think there's a lot of limitations that people inevitably, just human nature, kind of through whether they see an amputee, they project. But I will tell you, I surely would not be able to keep up with you on a mountain. Would not be able to catch a wave like you had, and I've not had the opportunities to potentially go to. I've never been invited to go to surf in Indonesia because I don't think they want to take a Barney with them. So that's just kind of the nature of it. But I think it's a lot of that mental strength has really it just really shines through everything you do, and the accomplishments that you've achieved are absolutely incredible. And I've loved hearing. I'm sure there are stories for days that we could definitely hear about. But before we let you go, I want to know, what are some of the books you're reading right now? What are some of the focus, or maybe some of your favorite books that you've read recently? I'm at near the end of this military history of the Roman Empire. Historical fiction is the right category. It's called I, Claudius by Robert Graves. He wrote it in the 1930s, I think. It's a classic. I just really like it. I didn't really know much about the Roman Empire, and I'm learning a lot. And what else? I have to look at I do a lot of reading. I'm gonna check out a book by Alan Watts on the way of Zen. Just kind of curious to learn about more about this Buddhism and mindfulness. And he has another book called The Wisdom of Insecurity that I'm going to check out. He was writing, I think, in the 1950s. I suspect he was
pretty far ahead of his time, although I haven't read anything by him yet.
I'm gonna have to check out that book. I've been actually, I read a lot of, I wouldn't call them self-help books, but mindfulness books or mindset books, some business books, but I've been looking for a good historical fiction. So I'll check that out. You said it's called Claudius?
Claudius. It's first 2 parts. It's really quite good. It's amazing actually how he researched and wrote this.
Dude, and I was just looking at it again last night because I was thinking about listening to it again, but there's a podcast called The History of Rome. Have you heard of this?
No.
It is awesome. If you're interested in the Roman Empire and just history and those types of things, one of the best podcasts. It's about, I don't know, it's a lot of episodes, a lot of hours. But when we were living in Italy, I listened to it, and I think you'd enjoy that. It's rad. It's really good.
Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah, it's called.
Have you read Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss? Because that's one of my favorites that I read.
Love it.
A long time ago.
Every night to my kids. Hop on Pop, the Lorax. Those are some good ones too.
Those are intense though. Those can be intense. There's some good lessons in there.
The
places you'll go, man. That'll get you.
The places you'll go.
Ooh, that'll get a tear going.
One of my faves for sure. Well, Dan, man, it's been a lot of fun. It's good to see you again, dude. I'm glad we got reconnected, and I would love to stay connected. If there's anything that we can do to help you to push O2X, to get you in front of people, and we would love to help in any way we can. And if there's anything else that you would like to offer or ask, our listeners, is there anything out there that you would ask?
I don't have anything off the top of my head. I mean, I appreciate you giving me this opportunity, and it's great to reconnect.
Yeah, man.
If you want to do another one, just let me know.
All right. Cool, dude. How can people get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Well, I like you, not on social media, although I did recently get on LinkedIn, and that's how you found me.
Right, man. That's right.
I am on LinkedIn now, and it's probably the beginning and the end of my social media. I don't want to go beyond LinkedIn. I think just for professional reasons, I needed to get on there. But maybe if you, I don't know through your podcast if you have a forum where people can put in comments. If anybody is wanting to get in touch with me, maybe they can reach out through the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, I'll put your LinkedIn profile.
Put a filter on it that way.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Yeah, like I said, tons of value here, man. I really appreciate you coming on. I think our listeners will get a lot out of this, just from a mindset perspective, and I appreciate you.
Thanks. It's been great to chat with you guys, and hope we can connect up in Colorado.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
Awesome.
Be great.
And I am looking for a best friend too. So, I mean, maybe we'll talk afterwards about that. So,
hey, Dan, I can tell you from experience, he's not a very good best friend. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this show. Share it, like it, give us some 5-star subscribe, all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, go fill your storehouse.
Make it a great day.
See ya.
See ya.